All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the late night edition of Post Match Review. My name is David. This is We Ain't Got No History. If you're familiar with our webpage, you're probably familiar with our Facebook page. Here we are, reviewing yet another draw against Arsenal. That makes it 4 draws in a row. If we count the Community Shield as a draw, we've now played him 4 times competitively. All right, Chuck wins the race to be first. We've played Arsenal 4 times competitively this season, and we've drawn every single one of them. Then we ended up losing on penalties in the Community Shield. We drew 0-0 at home in the league. We drew 2-2 away in the league. And we drew 0-0 again in the League Cup semi-final. 5 a.m. for Chuck. Who has to go to work at 5 a.m.? I mean, that's ridiculous. Almost as ridiculous as staying up till 2 or 3 in the morning. But it's what we do, because West Coast is the best coast, as they say. Our finishing is poor. Indeed, that's probably the biggest takeaway from last night's game, other than the usual freaking out on social media and Twitter. All right, if you want to be a master electrician, you'll have to wake up at 5 a.m. But that sounds pretty cool. Anytime you can call yourself a master anything, I think is a good way to go. So speaking of masters, was something we're apparently not at beating Arsenal these days. We used to be masters of beating Arsenal. But for whatever reason, Conte seems to have I don't know, I don't want to say troubles. I mean, each one could be explained possibly on its own, but taken together as a group of results, it's certainly getting a little weird that Conte can't beat Wenger, even when Wenger is just in the stands and relaying messages via Jens Lehmann's headpiece, as if that wasn't obvious. I don't know what Wenger's suspension terms were, but Mourinho once had to hide in a laundry basket. Here Wenger didn't have to go to any such subterfuge. Wenger has Conte's number. I'm not really sure that's necessarily the case. It's just something weird. There's an interesting thing where Conte said after the game, where he said it's easier to prepare for Arsenal, or easier to prepare for a game when you play the same team over and over. But so maybe there's like a little complacency there. It obviously works the other way too, where Arsenal know kind of how we're going to play. I don't know. It's a little concerning, and not sure what we need to do. I mean, basically today's game and last week's games were almost polar opposites of each other. Last week. In the league, is open end to end, back and forth. It finished 2-2, but it really could have been 6-5, 7-4. Morata missed obviously his hat trick of one-on-ones last week. Today, I'm not even sure Morata really had a chance that he could miss. There was one where Ospina spilled it and then caught it again, but Morata was offside anyway. Yeah, that's about it. He had one shot from range that was decent, but it's not like there were any major opportunities that he missed. The person who was guilty of missing the worst chances was Fabregas at the end of the first half, and Christensen on his headers twice in the second half. But Chelsea still worked over 20 shots. We easily outpassed. Had the upper hand of Arsenal, who said it in a very non-Arsenal way. They basically came here to sit deep and defend and counter. When was the last time you saw that happen from Arsenal? That said, their lineup basically they couldn't really do anything else with a lineup like that. They gave Ospina a starting goal instead of Czech, which is something that Wenger likes to do. I think we remember in the FA Cup final, I believe, Ospina started too, because Wenger names his cup goalkeeper, and so then he sticks with him the rest of the way. Most managers don't really do that. So Ospina started. The same back three as last week was Holding, Mustafi, and Chambers. Midfield four, same as last week. Maitland-Niles, whose nickname apparently is Mistake Land Niles, which is hilarious. It would be even funnier if we actually made him pay for it, other than that one time Zappacosta beat him last week. But, so Maitland-Niles, Wilshere, Granit Xhaka, and Bellerin. And then a front three of Welbeck, Lacazette, and Iwobi. And if that front three doesn't strike fear into the hearts of defenders, I don't know what will. So clearly, Arsenal weren't ever going to score. The trouble is, we didn't score either. Other things that are known is Wilshere picking up injuries. Unfortunately for him, it looks like he injured himself again. This time on blocking a shot, which, I mean, I guess it can happen. It's happened to me certainly when I've been playing. He went to block a shot, got a little unlucky, hit him right on the toes, and it twisted his ankle or his knee. Unlucky there for Wilshere. Chambers kind of looked to pick up an injury too when Hazard faked him out of his boots, but he managed to finish the game. Chelsea were in the 3-5-2 once again, almost the exact same lineup as last week. Courtois in goal, Rudiger, the one surprise change in defense. Gary Cahill actually wasn't even in the matchday squad. It supposedly is a rest thing, but whatever. To me at this point, Rudiger and Cahill are kind of interchangeable, so it's fine either way. So Rudiger, Christensen, and Azpilicueta across the back. Alonso, Fabregas, Conte, Drinkwater, and Moses in midfield. Drinkwater, the one change that everybody looked forward to from last week after Bakayoko's continuing poor form. So we were hoping that Drinkwater could step up and show us the way. And then the front two of Hazard and Morata. This formation is often accused of being a defensive one, but outside of maybe the first 10 minutes when both wingbacks kind of sat deep, this formation, especially with Fabregas and Drinkwater, can be very attacking. You keep Christensen and Conte deep in the center. Both wide defenders can advance with the ball. Rudiger and Azpilicueta. Moses and Alonso are more wingers than anything, and then Hazard has freedom up front with Morata. That said, I felt like we definitely could have used another forward to join Morata in the area more often, and we continue to never try the Morata Bakayoko combination, which could be something just through sheer aerial strength that could pose something new for defenders. Today, for whatever reason, Morata was often surrounded by 2 or 3 players. I guess yesterday, whenever it was. And I mean, he might be decent at dribbling or whatever, holding up the ball, but when you're constantly surrounded by that many players, you're really not gonna get that much done. There's an idea. This used to happen to Drogba all the time, even Costa. You kind of wear down the opposition, and then somebody else can nip in and score a goal when they're not paying attention. But unfortunately, that didn't really happen today for Chelsea. But yeah, as somebody brought up the Willian thing, was possibly the surprising part of that substitution is Willian came on for Drinkwater. Was it Drinkwater? Yeah, it was our first sub, and 68th minute was Willian came on for Drinkwater, and at that point everybody expected us to switch to a 3-4-3, just play Conte and Fabregas in the midfield, which not necessarily the best solution, but at that point Wilshere was already injured, so Arsenal really weren't posing much of a threat. Probably could have gotten away with Conte and Fabregas, and everybody expected Willian to push up in his customary position, play the right wing, but instead he played essentially Drinkwater's role, which is something that we certainly have theorized that Willian could do. I think even dating all the way back to like the days of, what was it, like 2013 when he first arrived, we often thought of trying Willian in deeper midfield. It seems like it would be something that his skill set is good at, or whatever, all the running and closing down. So yeah, we tried that today. Willian as the fifth midfielder instead of the third forward. Maybe not something to try in the future too often. Didn't seem very effective, but maybe it's something a one-off. I know we tried Pedro there for a couple times as well, and that experiment kind of has gone away, just as Pedro's minutes have kind of diminished over the last few weeks. So I don't know what's happening there, really. Yes, shout out to Austin, who's a familiar name I recognize in the comments. Am I making excuses for Morata? Not really making excuses, but, facts are facts. If you're constantly surrounded by that many players, there's only so much you can do. On the bright side, he didn't really miss any big chances today. On the not so bright side, he didn't get any big chances to finish, and his passing was rather terrible especially at the start of the game. He was constantly overhitting his passes out wide to the runners, which was not very helpful at all. But really, what I really would like to see us try with Morata is play him with Batshuayi, rather than just a small support guy like Hazard. Something completely different, or Andy Carroll, right? Since apparently this is a rumor that is not really going away, despite everybody's reaction to this is to scratch their head and shake their head and just kind of laugh, because really, Andy Carroll. But the rumor continues to be a rumor. Who knows how the transfer market works these days. We did sign Andy Carroll is a big no. He's a big something, that's for sure. If you look at it, people are already trying to justify this, which is also a bad sign, just because the narrative, momentum is kind of building up to where this might actually become a thing to be concerned about, and people are already justifying it in that. In an ideal world, Andy Carroll is, he's certainly somebody who's really good at heading the ball, and that's something that Chelsea have done really well overall as a team, is to score headed goals. So that kind of makes sense in putting a big man up top, crossing the ball to him, and letting him do what Morata also does, but possibly even better. Because, if there's one thing that Carroll's good at, is heading the ball. He also always does really well against us, which is super annoying, because whenever he's not injured, he is generally not that good. It's one of those where... I'm getting to the transfers. Everybody just wants transfers. There's not really happening, though, right? So, here we are trying to justify Andy Carroll. That's the extent of your exciting transfer news right there. Andy Carroll. Yeah, if that doesn't get you excited, I don't know what will. So Ross Barkley arrived. That transfer got done in the space of about 24 hours last weekend. Everton are still, most people in Everton seem still pretty upset by this, including the mayor of Liverpool, who not only complained to the FA and the Premier League, but also contacted the police, the actual police, the people who solve crimes, theoretically, to investigate this for signs of collusion and fraud, because we were ready to pay 35 million in the summer, and then Barkley was injured, so he said, "No, I'm not gonna move yet." Chelsea were like, "Well, whatever, you're injured," and now we got him for 15, so that's a cool 20 million discount. We gave some of that discount, about a third of the discount, to Barkley's agent apparently. So job well done, Mr. Agent. And this is all seems very fishy to some of the people up in Everton. So they've involved the police, as if the police don't have better things to do. There's a quote from Everton chairman Bill Kenwright, who called Chelsea's behavior absolutely immaculate, and I think that should hopefully be the final word on that nonsense. When will Ross make his debut? Is the question from Mayor Baba. Are you related to Mayor Anderson? Well, I'm hoping that Ross Barkley makes his debut next midweek, so about in a week against Norwich City in the replay, is what I'm hoping. I would be surprised if he was ready for this weekend. It really doesn't sound like he's coming up to speed that quickly, both in terms of physical and tactical instructions. But yeah, I think a week and a half should be a decent enough time for him to get acclimated enough to the system that we could take on Norwich, and he could help us there. Any news about Alex Sandro? Well, nothing serious, unfortunately. We've decided that Alex Sandro is once again amazing, so we would definitely like to sign him as fans, even if it does leave Alonso looking for minutes. Alex Sandro, apparently Juventus's latest asking price is 60 million pounds, that is. And that is a price that, according to, I think it was a Telegraph, Chelsea are unwilling to meet that price. So, as sort of expected, the Alex Sandro story is playing out exactly like it played out in the summer, where there's all this supposed interest from Chelsea, there's possible willingness from Juventus to sell, but it would require, it would require us to submit an actual bid, which it doesn't seem like we've ever done. It would also require Alex Sandro to actually push or ask for a move, which is also something apparently he hasn't done. So it's all kind of useless. It's all hypotheticals and non-action. Supposedly Juventus would also need to secure a replacement, which makes sense, and that's also something they really haven't done. They've been linked with a couple players whose names I forget at this point. If we are going to sign a left back this January, which I'm not all that convinced that we're going to do at the moment, there are possibly cheaper and more reasonable options. But of course, that opens up the whole question about should we even be spending money on just backups and squad players instead of saving money and spending it on one big signing, which both methods have pros and cons. But certainly, it would make a bit more sense to save our money, make 2 or 3, super expensive or whatever counts as super expensive these days in the market. Somebody like Sandro, fine 60 million, whatever, pay him. Spend 60 million on one amazing player instead of spending 30, 20, 15 million on 2 or 3 squad players, when we can fill those roles, in theory anyway, from the youth team, from the reserves, etc. As long as we can get a coach who kind of trusts these players. So you look at somebody like Barkley, and sure, he has experience. Obviously 150 or whatever Premier League appearances, 20 caps for England. So I mean, he's a good player. But the role that he's currently looks to be slated for is something that certainly Ruben Loftus-Cheek could fill, possibly this season, certainly next season. It's what's he doing at Crystal Palace. So it's one of those, that's the odd situation there, where we seem to be a lot more willing to spend this sort of money on squad players. buying more players for slightly less money than buying fewer players for more money, and thus probably getting slightly more quality, if any of that makes sense. So yeah, I don't think Alexandro is happening in January. I've been saying that for a while. Still time, plenty of time for me to be proven wrong. So stay tuned. Where exactly will Ross Barkley play? So Conte was asked the same question, and he said, the way I interpreted it, because he was talking about the number 10 role in a 3-4-3, and there's no number 10 role in a 3-4-3. But I believe he was saying that if we play Barkley, he's going to either play the outside forward in a 3-4-3, so that's the Hazard, Pedro, Willian roles on either side of the center forward, so probably the right side for Barkley. And then if we play a 3-5-2, then he would play the most advanced midfielder in that role. So kind of like what Drinkwater and Willian played yesterday against Arsenal, and what Bakayoko has been playing in the 3-5-2, but not very well. Yeah, I'm not so sure. Sammy says he will play instead of Fabregas. I'm not really sure that's a thing that's going to happen, especially not when Fabregas plays in the deeper role. It's Barkley himself said he could play anywhere across midfield, both central and attacking. But central midfield, like in a pivot situation next to Conte, is really not something that Barkley's ever done in his career. He's played attacking midfield, number 10, right midfield. That would be very surprising to see him deployed in a central midfield role, sort of like a creative Pirlo-esque role, which is the direction that Fabregas is trending in. I don't think that's something that we signed Barkley for at all. We probably jumped on him just because we looked at the ages of Pedro and Willian and realized that they're both at 30 or just about to be 30. So that's well, once you're 30 in football, it's the clock's ticking on your career, really. So I think we identified Barkley probably a few years ago now as a possible long-term replacement, homegrown, which counts as an added bonus there. Still just 24, once highly promising, now hasn't quite lived up to that promise yet. But it's if Conte sticks around, he has a knack for developing players and getting them the boost they need to get to the next level of development. So maybe this will work out for Barkley. If it doesn't, he did sign a 5.5-year deal, but there's several people were pointing this out, including Pat Nevin, the analyst and former Chelsea player. Just by signing for Chelsea, Barkley's value basically doubled. We paid 15. If we were going to sell Barkley in an open market, we could easily command 30 million at this point, even without ever playing for the club. So, yeah, Bakayoko's role, I think, is definitely the more likely situation for Barkley to be deployed. Although I think so, if he makes his debut against Norwich, which I'm hoping that he will, then I'm guessing we might see something like, say, Pedro, Batshuayi, and Barkley as a front three. Could be all right, or maybe Willian, Batshuayi, and Barkley. It depends on who gets the creative burden in that. Pedro is more of a finisher anyway. Somebody else I was listening to, what was it, the Chelsea podcast with whoever it was. Rick Glanville was the guest this week, and they were talking a little bit about Barkley as well. And Barkley certainly has his critics, but one thing that he does seem to have a knack for, more so than any other central midfielder we have now, is goal scoring. And a lot of the system that that Conte plays, the 3-4-3 and the 3-5-2, takes great advantage of late runners into the box. We usually see that with Alonso coming in from the left, to be the second or third runner behind the center forward and the wide forwards. But none of our midfielders are really doing that. Fabregas does it sometimes. Drinkwater did it a couple times in an earlier game, but missed both of his chances. So I think Barkley could possibly fill that role as well, where he does have a sort of an eye for a goal. I mean, it's not, don't expect Lampard levels of production, but he does have an eye. So he could, if he times those and meshes with the rest of the team, he could add some of that dimension back into the team, which has been missing. Yeah. So goals, expect a few goals from Barkley, hopefully, and that's possibly what we're thinking. Of course, we know that Conte doesn't set transfer direction at the club, and Barkley certainly was a name that was locked with Emenalo. Emenalo is no longer here. Obviously, he's at Monaco, but we still went back in for Barkley, which in fairness we said the team said immediately after the summer when Barkley kind of left us hanging. So we were just following through on that. I believe in Morata and Bakayoko says Junior Ampofo. That's good. We need more people to believe. Because without a lack of support, they're never gonna get back to the level or get to the level that we want them to be at. Honestly, the referee was a clown, says Franco. I don't think the referee was necessarily terrible. He let a lot of stuff go, but he was kind of consistent in letting a lot of stuff go. For example, I thought Conte could have easily had a yellow earlier than what he got, or earlier than when he got it. But of course, Xhaka himself got away with about 3 yellow card files. So yeah, I mean that's Atkinson for you. The one thing I didn't like about the referee was this video assistant referee, which in theory is a great idea. Obviously, instant replay is in a lot of sports. Some sports do it better than others, and the current implementation here in football is terrible, mostly because there is no communication whatsoever as to what's actually going on. So, even on television, it's confusing when just the referee just kind of stands there, and he was supposed to signal the set in the regulations that the referee is supposed to make like a square, TV monitor signal, but Atkinson never did that. He did more of he put his his finger to his ear as if he's listening to his headpiece, which you could kind of see on television, but just talking to a couple of people who were at the game, it was quite clear that they had no idea what was going on. So there needs to be just better communication, first of all, as to what's going on, why decisions are being reviewed. What's the time frame to when decisions can be reviewed. For example, there was a coming together between Moses and I want to say Maitland-Niles or Welbeck, forget which one it was, where Moses kind of mistimed his tackle in the area, and the Arsenal player took a couple steps, then fell to the ground, and the play went on. And then about 10 seconds later, when we were already in a different phase of play, it looked like they were reviewing this incident on video replay. So then everybody just kind of grinds to a halt, and everybody looks around, confused. What is going on? Is it possible to award a penalty at this point? Who knows? The decision eventually was that it was not a foul, which probably was an okay decision. But it's just nobody knew what was going on. So it's the implementation is definitely needs more work here. for VAR, video assistant referee. Drinkwater needs to be playing with development squad. Yeah, that's a little harsh. I think Drinkwater. We spent 35 million on Drinkwater. He's not going into the development squad. Certainly not as a full time thing. If he was injured, he was completely lacking minutes. He might pop up there for a minute. But yeah, no, Drinkwater. I think Drinkwater had a bad game yesterday, which happens. I don't think Fabregas had a particularly good game either. Missed so many missed passes from the man who's supposed to be amazing at passing. So it's Drinkwater can do a bit of everything, which is a good quality to have in midfielder. But Fabregas is supposed to be our creative hub, fulcrum, and he was not really getting that done yesterday. Certainly not early on, because first half was pretty bad. Mayor says Bakayoko and Morata are going to be the next Vieira and Drogba. They both didn't do well in their first season. Yeah, and that's certainly the argument where you have to keep faith sometimes a little bit, especially Bakayoko is still very young. He's 22, 23. And that's still even in football. That's a very young age where you're still improving and you're not at your prime usually. Morata also pretty young, not as young, but it's his first season being a feature forward at any of his teams, so there's a little adjustment period going on, and you gotta maintain faith. We often forget about Drogba's struggles in his first couple seasons at Chelsea, but he certainly didn't. He wasn't a legend after 2 years like he was in after 9 or however many he ended up playing for Chelsea. So yeah, we just need to keep faith, support. No need to put pressure on our new signings as Junior. Indeed, there should be some pressure, and hopefully, like Barkley's arrival, for example, hopefully does put a little pressure on Bakayoko. Kick him into gear. This is certainly something we've seen. We used to see with Willian many times over the years. He arrived in 2013, and then we kept signing all these other right wingers, and they all fell by the wayside one by one, including Mo Salah, who's obviously turned out to be a rather much better right winger than he was when he was at Chelsea. And of course, somebody like Salah and De Bruyne and all these guys is names to keep in mind whenever you start turning on young players like Bakayoko, and sometimes people or players don't hit the ground running right away. Somebody like Costa, when he arrived, like he took to the league like fish to water, as they say. Hazard, same thing, a goal and assist in like the first couple games. Sometimes people need a little adjustment period. So maybe that's exactly what Bakayoko needs as well, and Morata. Leroy says we need more men in attack. Fabregas is too slow in transition, can't join the attacking play quick enough, so leaves too much of a burden on Hazard and Morata. And then in defense, when he needs to do a little defending, he's way off the ball. Iwobi and Wilshere just kept running by him like he was standing. That about sums up Fabregas right there. We've known this for a while, and that's part of the reason why the 3-5-2 has seen so much use this season, is to kind of keep Fabregas in just a passing, quarterback, if you want to draw an analogy to American football. We should not be expecting Fabregas to be running around and plugging up gaps in midfield or leading the counter and stuff like that. But that's why I've maintained for a while now that Fabregas needs to be a sub, an impact sub. He's perfect in that role. As a starter, not so much. Maybe, if in an ideal world, Barkley comes in and does end up spelling Fabregas, although not as a direct replacement, but maybe as a midfield of Barkley, Conte, and then either Bakayoko or Drinkwater, and then Fabregas coming on at towards the end, like he used to do last season a lot. Last season was the perfect game plan was Conte and Matic in the middle, and then in the last 15, 20 minutes, you bring on Fabregas. He provides you that added midfield control, and you shut down the game, or you look for a winning goal or whatever. This season playing Fabregas from the start is fantastic for him. It's a nice personal triumph for Fabregas to work his way into the starting lineup after basically being written off when Conte arrived. But it's not. I don't think it's necessarily our ideal way to go about business. But it's all a work in progress. And hopefully we'll figure it out. I mean, it's not. I think it feels a lot worse than it actually is. It's three draws in a row here, 2-2, and then back-to-back 0-0s. Back-to-back 0-0s, by the way, is something that hasn't happened in over 5 years. Last time was in November of 2012 in the first two games of Rafa Benitez, when both home games were. We drew 0-0 with City and then 0-0 with Fulham, which was even worse. And then a bit later we lost to QPR. So yeah, those were the days. If you think back, is it really that bad now? No, it isn't. It could be a lot worse. We should remember that probably. So anyway, that hasn't happened in a while, but three draws in a row, but two of those have been in cups. So we dropped the 2 points in the league, but I think it feels a lot worse than it actually is. I mean, Norwich game was obviously pretty terrible, but the attenuating factor there is that there was a completely rotated lineup. So you gotta give it some leeway for that. Van Ginkel, or Barkley. Yeah, I don't think Van Ginkel is much of a future at Chelsea. Unfortunately, that's injuries kind of took care of that, and he clearly enjoys playing in the Dutch league back home. So I think eventually that move to PSV is going to turn into a permanent one. Van Ginkel, he looked really good early on, and then he suffered that unfortunate injury in like his third game under Mourinho, was it? And that his career derailed right there. Carlo to Arsenal. Yeah, that's the hot rumor. I mean, who knows how true is this? I don't know. There's probably something to it, just because Ancelotti is looking to get back into management starting next season. He's repeatedly denied taking over anywhere in an interim role, but he certainly will be looking for a job this summer. I think the more unbelievable part of that rumor is Arsenal actually getting rid of Wenger, which I think he might have to die in that job basically to give it up. It's his for life, literally. So I would be, I don't know. It doesn't know. I don't. What does he have to do to get fired? Relegation might be the only thing that would cause Arsenal to fire Wenger, and maybe not even then. And obviously, they're in no danger of getting relegated. Speaking of Arsenal, says Abu, would you take Walcott as a right winger? No. Come on, we can do better than Theo. Theo is a one-trick pony, and that trick is not very good. Um, there's a lot of players in Arsenal who are very fast. We noticed that today once again, just like last week. Bellerin obviously is basically he's got Olympic speed there on the wing. Not many players like that have. Not many players are that fast in the league. Maitland-Niles, another quick player. Iwobi, Welbeck, all quick players. Even Lacazette, I guess you could say. So I mean, definitely they're built around speed on the flanks, which is not a bad way to go. But Walcott, I mean, you know, after all these years, and how old? He's like 28 now. Is no, come on. I mean, it's one thing. It's one thing to sign Ross Barkley. At least he's young, semi cheap, and with a bit of promise. I mean, Walcott's basically at best he's in his prime. At worst, it's already going downhill. When you built your career on speed, you will finish earlier than most players. We've seen that with Torres. We've seen that with Owen, Michael Owen. And that's one of the reasons earlier somebody was bringing up Aubameyang. Is at least my perception of him is that his greatest asset is his pace, and that's not something that you can really keep up as you head into your late 20s, early 30s. But maybe he's the exception. Who knows? And overrated too, Theo Walcott. Yeah, I don't know. Theo, he's been at Arsenal forever. He's like Wenger. I don't think there's anything they can do to get rid of him. So who knows? Who knows? I'm not really sure. Other than Alexis, I'm struggling to think of any player I'd ever want to sign from Arsenal. And Alexis, unfortunately, looks to be heading to Manchester City. You would think we'd be in for him, but there's rumors that City are paying him like 400,000 a week, which is just absolutely outrageous. I mean, that's twice of what we're paying Hazard, and still, if Hazard gets his new contract, which should be around 300,000, that's still nowhere near 400, which is what City are apparently ready to pay Alexis. Whether that transfer goes through in January or in the summer seems to be up for debate. If I read this right, the arrangement they have is that it's up to Alexis, which is a little weird, but if he wants to join now, then he gets less money, but he gets to join now. If he wants to join in the summer, then he gets all of the money, because obviously it would be a free transfer for City from Arsenal. So it's just up to Alexis how much longer he can take being at Arsenal, which if I were Alexis would be like 2 hours. So I don't know. I'm kind of expecting that deal to happen, because what's another 30 million to add on to your already record spending. So yeah. That's the life. That's the life at the top of the Premier League right there. Top of the league and record spending. It's not a bad way to go. We're in a slightly lower bracket these days. No longer the financial powerhouse, so we have to make smarter signings, which tends to be a riskier strategy than basically buying the best and the most expensive players, who tend to turn out pretty all right. Who are we going to sign is the question on everyone's mind, and I'd say now that we have Barkley, probably nobody. Maybe Andy Carroll. Everybody on the Andy Carroll hype train. It's very lonely on the Andy Carroll hype train. Could use more company. Do you think we'll sign another striker in this window? Not really seeing it. I mean, and to truth be told, I really don't want us to sign a new striker. I want Batshuayi to to be used more often or in a better way or whatever it needs, whatever it takes to get him back into some sort of good form. The problem is any striker that we've been linked to this window has been absolutely like just the most demoralizing transfer rumor. Somebody like Andy Carroll, Christian Benteke, some kid named Richmond Boakie, or however you say his name. I don't know. Who are these jokers? Benteke had like one good season at Villa however long ago, and I know he's good friends with Hazard, and I'm sure Hazard would be delighted to have Benteke on board, which might be like the greatest argument to get Benteke, but I'm not really sure Palace are selling, so nobody is under pressure to sell anybody. That's actually the only reason this Andy Carroll thing is a rumor is because Carroll himself said that he's tired of being a backup at West Ham. So why would he come to Chelsea to be a backup? Sure, everybody likes to win trophies, but there's no guarantee that we're winning anything this season. So, it's not obvious why that would be a thing. Abu says in January you bought Anelka and Torres. Sure. I mean, I think Matic was the last like major January signing that we made that proved crucial. But I think with Barkley we got the business done early, and with Torres and David Luiz was the last time we really made such a massive signing that everybody, it was a head turning, earth shattering event. And then it turned out to be earth-shattering for entirely different reasons. But at the time, it was amazing. Anelka was not an impact buy. Certainly not at the time. He was down in wherever, like Bolton or something. He's basically everybody thought Anelka's career was over, and we bought him as a backup, as a secondary option. And he turned out to be really good for a couple of years. But he certainly wasn't this amazing signing that everybody just suddenly noticed and said, "Oh, Chelsea are contenders again." Just Anelka. Anelka was actually a smart buy, and it's some kind of the sort of the type of buy that is more likely to happen once again for us, if anything. That's my views on Abramovich these days. I mean, who knows? You can never tell with that guy, right? I mean, he doesn't ever talk in public. He's kind of around sometimes he isn't. By all indications, he seems to be just as into Chelsea as he was before. He seems to not meddle as much. We're not really doing the Shevchenko thing anymore, where it's this is an owner signing. Part of that might be financial. He can no longer throw the money around as much as or as impactfully as he could 15, 16 years ago. When you're thinking back, he's been Chelsea owner for this summer will be 15 years. He's one of the longest tenured, most entrenched owners in the Premier League. Almost all, or I'd say, without looking, I'd say at least half the teams have a more recent ownership change than Chelsea. So, it's Abramovich himself is kind of like the old guard these days. I think a big this summer when we decide the power structure inside the club, now that Emanalo's out, I think it's going to be a lot more telling as to how much power Granovskaya gets to keep. If she's going to continue running basically all aspects of the organization, or if we do bring in a technical director or somebody to handle that side of the administrative work around the club. So who knows? Do I think he's okay with the results and the mediocre buys? I think he's okay. I think. One thing, because he has been here for 15 years almost now, I think he's gotten a little mellower. We no longer we no longer seem to fire managers just because he woke up on the wrong side of the bed. But there's plenty of rumors that Conte will be gone, whether it's by both sides have decided or whatever. But that's kind of also the side effect of short term contracts, which is the way everybody's trending. Even Guardiola, who's about to set all sorts of records for the Premier League, was recently talking about, well, I don't know if I'll be here beyond next season. It all depends on your most recent results. What have you done for me lately? Managers are the expendable quantity, so no, I think Abramovich is good. We need to sort out this the stadium deal. Obviously, if that happens, he's in it for the long haul. Even more longer, even longer than 15 years. So that seems to. I don't know if in case you missed it, there's a latest challenge to the existence of a stadium is some local residences holding out on their right of light negotiations with the club. So the local council has to step in and exercise some of their governmental powers to get that thing moving. And still, right now, the proposed move-in date is something like 2024. So still a fair few years into the future, but hopefully work will eventually start on that. Maybe if not this summer, then next summer, and can finally look towards the future of a brand new stadium. It'll be exciting. Speaking of left back, what about Baba Rahman? Will he ever get a chance again? Well, probably not at Chelsea, I'd say. Unfortunately, certainly not right now. It was a few weeks ago, Conte was talking about how, Baba needs a lot of work, basically, to come up to speed, both, especially physically, but also obviously tactically. And Conte was very, he seemed to make it a very much as a point to talk about Baba the person and then Baba the player. And he was saying stuff like, we're ready to help Baba the person as much as we can, but Baba the player, maybe not. Maybe there's not much hope there, basically, is what he was saying, if you want to be harsh. With his improving fitness, he's been kind of sort of training for the last couple of weeks, not with the rest of the team, but probably on his own. That kind of reignited the Schalke rumors, which is where he was on loan before, and they were ready to take him in the summer again, but then the setbacks in his recovery from the ACL kind of prevented that. There was a rumor popped up from there, but even they are saying that it's contingent on his physical fitness. So it's a bit of a rough situation there with Baba. I wouldn't really count on it that he would contribute to Chelsea. Certainly not this season, and I don't know, maybe never. It'd be a pretty sad end. I mean, he's supposed to be pretty promising that one time, so. It is what it is. All right, it's going on about an hour. We should probably briefly mention this nonsense going on between Conte and Mourinho, which we can partially blame on the media themselves, but then we can obviously point the finger at Jose for doing his usual trollish things, and then Conte for kind of not rising above the whole thing, lowering himself to the levels of a Jose Mourinho and firing back with his own little personal insults. So if you missed any of this over the weekend, the brief version is that on Thursday, late last week, Mourinho, it was put to Mourinho that he seems to be losing his passion for the job and losing his passion for Manchester United because he sits on the bench and sulks a lot these days. To which Mourinho responded that just because he doesn't act like a clown on the touchlines, and clown was the specific word that he used, which is a word he's used before when talking about people like Conte and Klopp. So Mourinho said, just because I don't act like a clown on the touchlines doesn't mean I don't have passion, and blah, 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 blah. He didn't mention any names, but, this is Mourinho, so you know that there's always something under the surface. It doesn't just say random things. And he knew that the media would put this to both Klopp and Conte. Klopp basically ignored it, which is what Conte should have done, but that's not what Conte did. And possibly because Mourinho has been doing this needling for quite some time now. You can think back to last season's 4-0 at the Bridge, when Mourinho admonished Conte for urging the fans to celebrate a 4-0 win. All the constant jibes about defensive football, all this nonsense. And Conte himself called at the start of this season, he was talking about the need to avoid the Mourinho, quote-unquote, Mourinho season. So, there was definitely some festering conflict there. So when the press asked Conte about these clown comments, basically Conte had enough and said, Mourinho needs to re-examine his own history. He might be getting a little old and getting a bit of amnesia there. Conte actually used the phrase senile dementia, which is going a little too far because that's a serious condition. But the Chelsea PR team quickly tried to say, he meant amnesia, but amnesia is also amnesia in Italian. So I think Conte meant what he meant. Either way, he basically said, Mourinho is losing his mind and he needs to look at his own history. This was put back to Mourinho. And at that point, Mourinho looked like it was going to explain the whole thing with his usual media angle. He said, of course, obviously I remember my own history. I've changed. Now this is my own way forward. I was basically, Mourinho saying, I was basically talking about myself and this is all your fault, the media's fault, whatever. And so he goes on like this 5-minute rant about the media and about how his quotes were misrepresented. At the very end, he says, but at least I will never be banned for match fixing. And there is no doubting, what that was all about. So then that's put back to Conte. Conte obviously this is not something that he takes lightly. If you ever seen the clip of him talking about the accusations against him after he was exonerated in civil court of all charges, it should be said, although he did serve a ban. It wasn't for match fixing. Technically, it was for failing to report suspected match fixing, which is a story that also doesn't really make sense, but that's Italian court right there. So he already served his ban by the time his appeal was confirmed. So Conte, explained all that, and then he repeatedly called Mourinho a little man. Conte was saying that he doesn't do the cinema, quote unquote, that Mourinho engages in, the mind games and all this nonsense, the sideshows that he does. And Conte said that he's literally ready to fight not only Mourinho, but any of these other Premier League jokers who keep continually coming at him. So there you go. We could be in for a worldwide wrestling, little, bring back Hulk Hogan and all these guys. Little pay-per-view event, Premier League Manager Showdown. My money is definitely on Conte, so that could be fun. Fortunately, Mourinho and Manchester United don't play for like a week now. They don't play until this weekend, so he didn't have another chance to address these comments. And Conte kind of said, this is a personal issue between him and I. It doesn't concern the clubs or anything like that, and we will talk. We'll talk face to face in February. That should be exciting. Hopefully there are cameras around. So anyway, that's the brief version of that little thing, as brief as it can be. I think that'll wrap it up for today. Fortunately, we had plenty of other things to talk about than this another 0-0 here for Chelsea. Of course, it's halfway or halftime at the League Cup semifinal, two-legged League Cup semifinal. So in 2 weeks, we go to the Emirates and try to finish the job. We will need something. Probably will need something more than another draw. Uh, Although you can draw and then advance on penalty kicks, but let's not do that. Let's finally win one against Arsenal. Before then, we will have two league games and FA Cup replay. Coming up next for Chelsea are Leicester City on Saturday, so that's a pretty quick turnaround. And it'll be very interesting to see how much Conte rotates or who starts that game. Because we went with a full strength lineup today, or on yesterday, I guess, at this point. And that's only 2 days rest between that game and Saturday's game. So, could be interesting. Could be interesting. Last question. Do you think Loftus-Cheek will be ever recalled in Chelsea's first team? Not this January, but hopefully. I think the plan looks like he will compete for a spot next summer. That doesn't sound too promising for him, but yeah, maybe he will be the next Christensen. Who knows? Also congrats to Andreas Christensen on his new Chelsea contract, 4.5 years. So there's your loan army plan working to perfection. Oh, Andreas Christensen, making it count. So, yeah, that's it. If you watched any of this, I watched all of this. Thank you. Thanks for all the questions. And here's to better result on the weekend against Leicester City. We'll talk to you after.